Have you ever longed for meaning in life? Well, look no further because you'll get that from us. We are the XP Billionaires, and this is our podcast about video games. So maybe I was lying to you.
Yeah, you made it sound like a cult there for a second. I was concerned.
The cult of video games, the cult of RPGs. I mean, there's options. There's options. All right. Well, welcome to one and all. Let's get on track before you guys stop listening to us. I am Rayfe, and we have Sky Knight. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm good.
Awesome, awesome. And Irene Rogue, how are you today?
I'm a little tired, but I'm good.
No, that is fantastic. I mean, we're all tired, we all have lives, or we don't and just been gaming too much. You the listeners decide. Now, we have got another top three for you today, and it's going to be a fun one because I always find these particular topics to be fascinating, just to see what everyone likes in terms of their favorites of whatever we select. And for this week, we have got something cool. RPGs typically follow a fairly straightforward formula. You fight enemies, you gain experience, you level up. But what helps an RPG stand out is when a separate system is incorporated into a game for additional stat building or skill customization. Sometimes you get a separate pool of skill points to spend and learn new passive or active abilities. Sometimes you wear equipment until you've learned a new skill from it, and so on and so forth. This week, we thought we would give out our top three stat and skill building systems and just kind of explain a little bit of what makes them awesome. Now, I was looking at our lists and everything that we've written down for each other, and it looks like I may have stolen one from each of you. And for that, I do truly apologize, but by all means, please help me out with them. I do like your input.
Looking at the notes, I'm sure mine is in all caps.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, we'll jump off that bridge when we come to it. So let's start. We've got the turn order decided this time around, so it's going to be myself, then Sky, and then Irene. So let's get started with our number three in terms of skill and stat building. As for mine, my number three choice is the Revelation system in the Yakuza series. Now, these basically started around Yakuza 3 and up. I believe they are in 5, but I have yet to play the game, so we'll get to that at some point. So it starts in Yakuza 3, where Kiryu encounters a man named Mac. He's an American photographer living in Japan, and he's on a quest to find the perfect shot. And he shows you how you can go about doing that, and it's by starting a blog on your cell phone. So here's how it works. So you identify a person doing something strange in the city. Usually you'll get a text from Mac giving you a kind of an idea of what to look out for. And when you find that person, you point your camera at him and you get to watch a scene. And the scenes themselves are of the most ridiculous situations. The first one, for example, is your tutorial one. It's an old woman who's on a scooter just driving off after getting some groceries. She looks over at a billboard and it's her favorite K-pop actor. And she's just staring at the poster with hearts around her, the whole nine. It starts going into slow-mo when she hits a car. The scooter goes flying and she's on it doing a somersault. It's all in slow motion. She's just still looking at this guy's face. She makes a perfect landing and just continues to drive off. At that point, during those times, there's some QTEs where you have to take some snapshots. And as long as you do all three of them, you then get the chance to add a little blurb. It's a multiple choice blurb for your blog. And if you do all of this correctly, Kiryu would learn a new move. It's a move that's typically inspired by what he just saw. So, for example, the move that Kiryu learns there was this like jumping backflip thing where he just dive bombs somebody. It's priceless. And these are just scattered all over the city. You find them, you learn every time you get a text, you just look for them. And in Yakuza 4, it gets even more ridiculous because there's 4 protagonists. So Akiyama gets the cell phone, and he emails Mac these pictures. But for Saejima, who is basically an escaped convict, he doesn't have a cell phone. So he's given wood and a chisel, and he makes carvings. As
By the way,
for
he also looks like a caveman, so it's totally fitting.
that is very true. Saejima is very much a big burly caveman.
I'm
But
pretty sure you can go back to jail for frantically making a wood carving of somebody on the sidewalk without their permission. That seems like it should be something you should be arrested for.
a little bit. And just to get even more ridiculous, the tutorial one for Akiyama in Yakuza 4 was probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. You find a woman on a roof, she's screaming, is like, "Stop, thief!" And it's clearly a panty thief because you see the guy hanging upside down, wearing nothing but underwear, has a pair of panties over his head, and is holding a bag of like other women's undergarments. And he does this whole Spider-Man like thing where he's jumping from building to building, eventually tries to make this like perfect landing on a railing post, misses, falls, uses a bra to catch a ladder to hold onto him to hold for dear life, but it eventually breaks, and then it's just this slow motion scene of him just falling with this orchestral operatic music playing in the background while the panties just fall, and ends up he breaks his back and he ends up with a bra on his head. Like, it's look it up on YouTube if you haven't seen it. It is by far the stupidest but funniest thing I've seen in a long time.
That checks out. It's a Yakuza game.
Yep.
Also, to the old woman who like did that perfect backflip on her scooter, bitch, I hurt myself putting on my socks this week. It's not fair.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, that's my number 3. So let's move it on. Sky, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is the Magatama from Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. In Nocturne, at the beginning of the game, you're basically infected with these Magatama, which are parasites. And that's how you get demon abilities for yourself. So I love that you get your new abilities through parasites. I love how you can use them to completely customize the Demi-Fiend to have the abilities you want and need. Especially those that prevent auto-kill.
Yeah, those are nice.
Those are really nice. But yeah, it's creepy and thematic and appropriate for the setting, and I don't know. It's just magic. There isn't much to say about it, but other than the fact that it's, it's appropriate, it works, and it allows you so much flexibility on basically the one human, quote unquote, person that you have.
No, absolutely. And if I remember it right too, it was like the closest thing to equipment that you had in the game too. So different Magatamas would also offer different weaknesses and resistances too.
Yes, that's right.
No, it was definitely an excellent system. And you're right about the thematicness. Like, I remember that first scene where you're waking up and it's all like first person view, and basically this guy just puts something in your eyeball and it just kind of wriggles inside. Like, you don't get to see any of that, but like that's the implication, and it's really creepy, but it's just so perfect for what was going on.
Yeah.
Sounds very Messengers from the opening of Bloodborne. Like you get these, like you wake up and there's these little things that look like fucking melted candles hovering over you.
Yes, that's not inaccurate.
All right, Irene, what is your number 3?
My number 3, I went with the skill customization system in The Witcher 3. And the reason I did this was because I found that it required me to be more thoughtful about my selections than a lot of other games, while at the same time encouraging me to experiment. So, what you could do was you had skills that were divided into like 4 broad categories: combat, magic, potions, and utility. And you didn't have to take the skills in order. You just had to have so many points in the category in order to unlock lower tiers. So like I didn't necessarily have to unlock the previous fast attack skill in order to get the next one. I could say unlock a fast attack skill, and then with enough points in the combat tree, I could say then unlock the second tier strong attack skill without having taken the first one. in that sort of like progression tree. So it was allowed you to be very choosy. But one of the things I really liked was then you had to equip the skills to a limited number of slots. So it encouraged you to not only like be choosy with your skills, but to also develop them for greater potency, and to also try out a few different things in order to basically suss out your play style. And like I really liked about this game is that you could really go about things very differently. Like you didn't necessarily have to go as heavy into combat as I did in order to play the game. You could have gone really heavy into magic and or heavy into potions and made yourself like basically impossible to kill. But what you also had was these slots that you had the skills in. They came grouped in groups of 3, and they would be coded like red, blue, and green. Throughout the game, you'd pick up red, blue, and green mutagens, which then you would equip in like a passive slot that could double or even triple the potency of these skills, depending on the mutagen's strength.
Oh, cool.
So like, yeah, so like you were encouraged to like group your 3 red skills, your 3 combat skills in the same little spot, so then you'd slap a red mutagen on it and it would just shoot the potency through the roof, right?
Right.
So like it encouraged you to sort of like really look at the skills chart as a whole and be selective in what you wanted. You didn't necessarily have to have everything in order to be effective. Like I don't think I really took any of the ranged combat shit because like ranged combat wasn't worth it in my opinion in The Witcher 3. I went with mostly fast attack things because the animation, like it opened me up for too many frames for the monsters to come at me. I preferred being able to get in, smack him, and get out again. And that played into the fact that I also like to wear lighter or medium armor for Geralt, because that would allow him more stamina to use just moving around the battlefield and actually have the motion I needed. Like the level up system combined with the equipment system and the customization with the mutagens really allowed you to like play however you wanted, I found.
Right.
So you could really take on those contracts. Like my most effective method was usually using there's a certain kind of skill called the oils. And I fucking love those things because they would enhance your damage over against a certain monster type. And in The Witcher 3, you only had to make them once to have permanent access to them.
Uh-huh.
So in the potions like tab, I like really concentrated heavily on things that would improve my oils and add extra effects. So like one of the ones I took was like if you hit a creature with the oil that it's weak against, it also poisons them, or it has a chance to poison them. So shit like that. And like because I really liked those things, there was a skill tree that was specifically devoted to that, and I was like, let's do this shit. It was also super generous with the skill points, I'm just going to point out. So you were able to try out a lot of different things without necessarily feeling like you had wasted shit.
No, awesome.
Anyway.
That was definitely a good choice there. Okay, so time for number 2. So, which is our number 2 skill building systems? So going back to myself, let's get to it. So for me, I have selected the Grow Book system from Manichemia Alchemists of Alrevis.
And this is the one you stole from me, and I am mad because I was like, "Oh, this is a great one."
I didn't even think you had played it, to be honest.
I played the first Manichemia. I played the shit out of it.
Okay, yeah, we all did. Well, anyway, so there's not really a big secret to how this system works because it was almost mandatory that you do it for the game because there was no leveling system in Manichemia. So the only way to gain new stats was to use the Grow Book, and to use the Grow Book, you had to do what any Atelier game is good for, and that's alchemy. So for every item you would create, that item would be added to one character's Grow Book. And at that point, then you could basically use the skill points you've accrued from combat to unlock new stat abilities, new guard specials, new switch out abilities, more attacks per turn, or more hits per turn, and so on and so forth. And it was just fun. It really made you want to just keep finding recipe books so that you could create new items. Yeah, there's really no other way to put it. There's not really anything else that was special to it, but it was just so much fun to to just keep building your characters this way. And you could and they really designed it so that you were rewarded because some of the new attack animations, the defensive stuff, like for example, I remember Muppy's big defensive switch in, whereas when he comes in, he would basically suck everyone up into his ship and make them like not take any damage for that turn. That was actually a lot of fun.
Spaceship, for those who haven't played the game. Muppy is a tiny little alien, and I also would have liked to have done this one. So you, this we all love this one.
Everyone's mad.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
What I was going to say was I actually really loved the roguebook system in Manacania to the point where when I got to play Atelier Rorona, I was like, great, more alchemy games. And then I was like, oh, why did not use that? Because now I'm not forced to do the alchemy, which was like I'm like, you've managed to really marry two of the game's core mechanics together with the grow book. And it's like, no, don't separate them out again. That was really good.
Manichemia was a real, like, very much a side piece in the Atelier stories. Like the two games they made, like completely different from the others. Like even compared to the Iris trilogy, where they were, your traditional level-based RPG with a full-on plot, that kind of thing. I don't know. They just felt completely different because it was done as in a school setting. It was done with this, so they did something that was unique to it. And I'm not too upset that it wasn't elsewhere, but at the same time, yeah, it would have been nice to see again.
Yeah, like that's the thing. I really liked the fact that it married two of the game's very core mechanics together so well. That's what I really liked about it.
Absolutely.
And I quite liked Manichemia a lot. Specifically, just the characters were bonkers anyway. It was always fun.
They were all
like,
weird.
Yeah, like Muppy, like he's cute and pink and has a little pink spaceship, but he is like, I'm going to wipe out all life forms on this planet. He was like an invasive species, and people were like, "Oh, you're so cute, pat, pat, pat."
If you've played the game before but haven't gotten Muppy's ending, look it up on YouTube. It is so funny.
Yes, it is. Okay, well, moving on. Let's hear Sky's number 2. I'm actually looking forward to this one. So, what is your number 2?
My number 2 is Digivolution. Yes. Woo! I am going with the various Digimon RPG games, epitomized most recently by the Cyber Sleuth games on PS4. So, how this is skill building? Well, the Digimon gain skills as they level, but they get to keep the skills as they go up and down the evolution trees. So, the more you bounce around the evolutionary paths, the more options for builds you have for your Digimon. And it's awesome. It's easy, it's flexible, it's always fun to go up a new evolutionary tree and see what you discover because you don't know what you're going to get. And yeah, you can end up with, by the end of the games, you end up with Mega Digimon with skills from 5 different Mega Digimon, and it's just it's just so bustedly amazing. It's handled a little differently in some of the games, like the I remember in the DS ones, which I played the crap out of, it also, going down the Digivolution paths also opened up more room for building stats. So there was that as well in those games. Though with the Cyber Sleuth games, it is just the skills that you gain.
Also, at the same time, like you had to go back down on the evolutionary line in order to gain more, get a higher level cap.
Yes, that's true.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, they factored all of this into it in terms of making sure you got to play around on the trees, and that I think was a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, regardless though, you really want to play around on the trees because, like, you only get like a couple of really good skills, in each evolution, right? So, and the higher evolutions, I mean, so you want to bounce around to the different evolutions and see what you can uncover and all of that. So it's a great system, and it's a lot of fun to see all the different forms, and build always have a little project to Digimon to build up, and to aim for some of the more difficult to achieve forms, because usually there's always some sort of requirement for being able to digivolve. So whether it be levels, sometimes it's specific stats, whatever. So it's a great system and so bloody addictive. Man, I've played the crap out of those games.
Yeah, we both did. All right. Well, let's move on to Irene's number 2. What have you got?
I'm also going with another North American RPG series, the Souls games. Specifically, I'm calling out Neo for the leveling system there. Specifically, the reason I'm doing this is because I found the leveling system that they took from the Dark Souls games, where you you collect the souls in order to boost up your stats. You need more and more souls to boost them up further as you progress through the chain. Allowed for a level of precision when building the character that I really appreciated. So, especially in Neo, each stat is very clearly tied to a specific type of weapon. So, your strength is good for axes and odachi damage. Your dexterity is good for kurosagama. Your skill is good for dual swords and tonfa. You had a very delineated this skill will not only improve your stats in this way, but it will also improve your damage with this weapon. And depending on the weapons you liked, you could choose to really mainline some of those stats. And they married this really well to a skill system that encouraged you to not only try different weapons, but also to pick a favorite eventually and really do a shit ton of damage with it. Because the more you use the weapons, the more proficient you get. The more proficient you get, the more skill points you get. The more skill points you get, the more you can spend on new moves in that weapon. And it just eventually you become it becomes a self-perpetuating machine where you can start learning some crazy ass shit with those weapons, and they're really cool. There isn't a single weapon that I found to be lackluster in Neo, even if I didn't particularly like the axes. They were always kind of cool. And they all played slightly differently. The Odachi was really great at draining human stamina, as well as and ki, as well as the tonfa. Whereas, the dual swords, they were a lot lighter strikes, so they weren't as good at that, but they were really good at just getting in that precise hit when you needed it. So they all had their own disadvantages and advantages, and because you were able to really pick and choose where you wanted to spend your energy with laser-like precision, essentially, you could come up with some pretty powerful shit and do some pretty crazy stuff at the end, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, it was interesting. When I was playing Neo way back when, I was working with the katana build, because so far that had been what I was really good working with. But yeah, seeing some of the other options was kind of cool. I found that I definitely liked ranged stuff in specific situations, but more specifically with the shotguns.
Oh,
And
with the the rifles or the cannons, because there were both of those.
oh yeah, the rifles specifically. The cannons were just a little too slow for me.
Yeah, right? They
Yeah,
did a lot of damage, but they were slow.
yeah.
And that's a lot. Again, it's a lot. It plays into the risk reward system of the game. I'm yeah, this Odachi's gonna hit them like a fucking truck, but it's gonna take forever to swing it.
Yeah.
And there are some monsters that it wasn't worthwhile approaching them with anything but lightning speed. Whereas other monsters like the giant horned yokai that are everywhere in that game. You wanted something that was going to give you the ability to do an overhand swing, because if you could hit them in the face, they'd fall over because you'd knock their horns off.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Cool.
That's why I really like the Odachi, because I would go into high stance mode and just like swing straight down on their head, like where their heads were, and they would fall over, giving me an opening to their backs. So certain monsters required you to use like certain tactics that would make it easier to beat them. Like that one was definitely like you could achieve that with almost every weapon, but it was easier with some versus others.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Odachi had a very clear vertical like overhead swing. It was slow as fuck, but it did the job. It was
Right.
much harder to achieve with like the dual swords because you just didn't have the reach. It was still possible, but you had to like finagle a bit more. Your positioning had to be a little bit more on point.
Okay.
Anyway, that's my second choice. Neo.
All
Looking forward to Neo too.
All right. Well, that brings us to the best of the best in our opinions. So let's get right down to it. What is the number one skill building system? So my choice, and I also have been made aware that this was the other one that I stole. So again, apology. But my choice was the Magicite system from Final Fantasy VI, or for you Super NES players, Final Fantasy III. This one is one that I completely didn't understand the complexity of it. It was simple, but it also had a complexity for more advanced players. Like when I first played this game, I was 8, maybe, but I loved it nonetheless. And this was something that I really got to appreciate more and more as I did playthroughs later on in my life. So by harnessing the power of a dead Esper, the Final Fantasy VI party was able to master the long forgotten art of magic. Basically, whenever you equipped a magicite to a character, you would gain magic points to learn the spells associated with that particular magicite. Once you hit so many magic points, you would then permanently have access to that spell, and you could then equip another magicite if you so chose, so that you could get everyone a very, very good set of spells.
But it's
The,
not. But it's not just the spells. The
exact
Many of the magicites come with level, basically stat boosts when you level with them equipped.
That's correct. Yeah. So basically, as long as you held on to that particular magicite, every time you leveled up, you would get an increase to a specific stat. Now, not every magicite had this, but if you got the right ones, then if you know what you're doing, you could really go nuts with your party. Like for example, like as I got older, I learned that Sabin, for example, really had no magical talent whatsoever. You could build it on him if you wanted with the system, but there was a much better way to play his character. And in this case, there was a specific magicite that at every level he would get strength +2. By level 70, near the end of the game, he was hitting with for max damage even with his offhand. So if you're equipping the Genji glove and having him wield 2 weapons, normally the offhand would do slightly less damage, but this completely superseded it because he almost had a maxed strength stat. And this was even up against the final boss, whereas you could rig it so that Sabin's regular attack would swing 8 times. 8 times for max damage. And it was it was fun to just watch him do it. Like we're talking pixel graphics, but it was still so much fun to watch. But conversely, there was the same kind of idea with doing it for there was another magicite that could do it for magical proficiency. So or your magic stat. So once your mage characters learned the spells you wanted them to learn, you just pop this onto one of them and just tank them out so that, when you got them to be dual casting and we're only like paying minimal MP for their spells, like they were hitting for max damage. So best damage, minimum cost. You could break the game so easily.
Yeah, and Lord knows I love that.
Well, yeah, I mean, didn't we name one of our episodes about that?
Yes, I was just thinking of that.
Yeah, but yeah, that is my number one. It's and it was from a game so early on in console gaming's life cycle, that it was really interesting to see something that was easy for beginners, but also so much more fun for more advanced players. And I love that accessibility. So that takes the number one spot for me. Sky, let's hear your number one. What is your number one skill building system?
All right, so my number one skill building system is that of Suikoden 3. I love the skill building system. So basically, it's really a rather simple setup. You have skill trainers, so one that specializes in physical abilities, one that specializes in magical abilities, and then you get skill points when you do combat, and you go to these trainers to level up their skills. Now, everyone has access to most skills, though they are more naturally gifted in some than others. So you'll be able to get some higher with certain characters than others. But there are ways around this. Like there are some equipment in the game that can actually give a boost to certain skills. So if you're cunning and thorough, you can actually make some really unexpected characters pretty amazing. I mean, I always think of Juan in particular. Juan is this guy. You meet him in Thomas's chapter. He sleeps all the time. That's what he does. And he has a rune on him that you can't unequip that makes sure he starts every battle asleep. But once you figure out ways to prevent him from falling asleep to begin with, there's an accessory, especially later on, that helps with this. And you build his swing skill. He's one of the best characters in the game. And during the early game, during Thomas's chapter, he is borderline useless because if he doesn't get attacked, he doesn't do anything. And of course, the enemies, knowing my luck, don't attack him. And that's just one way in which you can exploit the system, especially the swing skill, which was really a new thing for Suikoden. The higher your swing skill, the more attacks you can get in a turn. And the best people at the swing skill could do obscene damage. Juan and a character named Emily just were doing obscene amounts of damage. I take them against the final boss. It is a beautiful thing to watch. They basically beat the final boss to death with their bare hands, and it's amazing. I just love it.
Well, this is why no one messes with Snorlax. You know that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yes, Juan is basically the human Snorlax. So it's really fun to go into the character, into the skill building menus for each character and figure out what they're good at, what special abilities they might have, because there are some unique abilities to specific characters or specific types of characters. If memory serves, I think the ducks do have some unique stuff. But yeah, the system just works so well. And and it's very easy to track. It's just all like a school rating, A, B, C, whatever. It works so great, and that's why it's one of my top choices.
Fantastic. It was definitely a lot of fun, and it was probably the best iteration of the skill building system. Like they did put it into Suikoden 5 as well, but I certainly liked it better in 3, definitely.
Yeah, it was much more interesting to play with and more flexible than the one in Suikoden 5, especially since you could only equip 2 skills at a time in Suikoden 5.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we got one left. Irene, what is your number one skill building system?
I like mainlined Western games this time.
Somebody had to.
I went with Borderlands 2. And this, hear me out, the leveling system is essentially divided into like 3 main trees of skills for each character. And generally they worked as like, I improve this thing my character is good at, I improve their ultimate move, and I improve their ability to be extremely lethal. And that was like super high level, broad brush, what the 3 categories represent for each character. However, they were different for every character. For example, the Psycho class, which you eventually unlocked if you got the DLC, he had an entire skill tree dedicated to setting himself on fire. And it would be like, while you are on fire, you do like 200% damage. And if you hit something, if you like shoot something while you are on fire, they also light on fire. So like, some of them were just bananas. Like, I was never really into that particular character, but I was like, this whole skills tree requires me to be on fire. And one of the first skills I learn is every time I attack, I have a chance to set myself on fire.
Because why not?
Because why not, right? So, but you had, the big thing about it though was that Borderlands 2 was a level cap. And you could not purchase every single skill on that skill tree with that level cap. So you had to be strategic about how you did it, so that you could really customize, like, make your characters really good at specific things. And it was flexible enough that it could be like, well, what if I use this kind of weapon and then equip this and focus on this, and oh shit, they're all just dying now. Case in point, I played the Siren, Maya, more actively than any other character for Borderlands 2. And I decided to go with her blue and red skill tree the most, because the blue one basically upgraded her survivability and added a whole bunch of extra effects to her basically ultimate ability, which was the phase lock, where she would float an enemy in midair, and basically they are helpless for a limited period of time. But it would be like, hey, while you're phase locked, every hit you deal gets you health back. Gets you and the party health back. Or improves your shields, or like, so there was a whole bunch of extra utility skills. The red tree was basically like, oh, and by the way, you set them on fire. Also, you shock them. Also, acid damage. And finally, in the blue tree, there was a thing that's like, your melee damage now do just slag damage. And slag damage, it was the most interesting addition to Borderlands 2 in that it basically doubled any damage from any other source once applied. So, like, this is basically what I did with Maya was, I slag them, I phase lock them, it immediately lights them on fire and sets them and like coats them in acid. And then, also my rate of fire is improved, so I'll whip out an SMG and just fucking unload into them while I cannot miss.
Yep. Sounds solid.
Yep, yeah, so you can create some pretty broken combinations with these characters. And like, my favorite skill for Maya was essentially a skill that only had 1 level, you could not improve it, and it was called Acid Cloud. And basically every couple of hits, she would create a giant cloud of acid that would envelop the enemy field and do massive amounts of acid damage, just cause. And it wasn't even at the bottom, it was like in the middle.
Wow.
So like, yeah, she basically was an elemental maelstrom by the end of the game if you went with this sort of build. Which, of course, the build I went with. But if I didn't like it, the best part about the Borderlands 2 system was, if I didn't like the build that I had, or it no longer suited the gear that I needed to use because maybe my gear wasn't necessarily wasn't high enough level to sustain me anymore, I could walk on up to a customization in town and basically reset all my skills for a relatively meager dollar amount. So anytime you were able to just blow away any changes you made and completely reselect from scratch with the skill points you've accumulated so far. So even if you wanted to try something different, it was really easy to experiment.
That's helpful.
Mm-hmm. And it was like, for the, like, in a lot of games, like a lot of these games, like any book or item that will allow you to reset your skills is super bitchin' expensive, right?
Yeah.
Not so in Borderlands 2. It basically was like, yeah, you can fuck up. Here, give us like $100. It was a pretty meager dollar amount it asked for. And I think it was scaled based on how much dollars, like how many dollars you had in your current possession. So that, like, essentially it would be like a percentage of how much money you had. So if you were broke, you didn't have to worry about not being able to pay the piper.
That's pretty generous, actually.
Yeah, Borderlands is it's a strange first-person shooter game because it straddles the line between an FPS and an RPG extremely well. Leans so hard into absurdity that I'm barely certain that everybody writing it wasn't just on drugs constantly. And thank you for that. Thank you for your diligent sacrifice. It was amazing. But like, and it also is like, yeah, it's really easy to just pick up if you've never played one of these games before, because like it's pretty generous in terms of like, yeah, don't worry, like here's some kid wheels until you get your feet. And by the way, if you get killed, it's not an automatic death. You just have to kill something before a certain timer runs out, and then you get back up on your feet and keep killing. And like with the skills as well, you don't necessarily have to know what you're going for at the beginning of the game and understand what the character is good at in order to make some early choices and just be able to back them out if you fucked up or it doesn't necessarily suit you that well.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so I liked its flexibility. I liked it's very forgiving, and it encourages you to try new stuff.
That's a great choice. Absolutely. All right. Well, those are our top 3 skill building systems. You know, we all seem to like a couple of specific ones, but at the same time, we all had other options to talk about, and I think that's excellent, and it shows that there's a lot of variety out there. So as always, we'll ask you listeners, like, let us know what skill building systems you like in your RPGs, and you can let us know either on our WordPress site, xpbillionaires.wordpress.com, or you can check us out on Twitter. You can find me at billionairesxp. And you can also find me on Twitch at Rayfe, all one word. Sky, where can everyone find you?
I'm at Skyknight XP on Twitter and Twitch.
And Irene, where are you?
I am iRogue_XP on Twitter, like the iPod, except Rogue. And iRogueXP on Twitch, where I'm currently playing through Horizon, because robot dinosaurs.
And yeah, our Twitch schedule seems to be Tuesday through Thursdays. So there'll be one of us doing something every night around 7 o'clock. That's 7 p.m., I should say, of course. And
Eastern time.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, as always, please give us a donation on Ko-fi if you like what you're listening to. We always want to do whatever we can to help make this podcast and all of its associated features better for you guys. So if you have any suggestions too, please let us know. All right, well, that's all the time we've got. Thanks everyone for being here. Thanks everyone for listening. And as always, keep gaming.
Bye.
Bye.